Welcome back, everybody, to Ein Sof Learning. This week's Torah portion is Ekev. The word Ekev literally means because. However, it has more than one definition. Other definitions of the word Ekev are heels, as well as is part of the name of Yaakov, or Jacob, the second forefather in Judaism. It's spelled Ein Kuf Bet, which if you sum up the gematria, you get 172. 172, which is a very important number in the Chokhmah of Kabbalah. But just hold that on the side for a second. Let's see what the other definitions of this term, Ekev, actually mean before we can understand what the Parsha is going to be telling us. Before we can understand the Parsha, we have to at least have some understanding about the name of the Parsha, because the name of the Parsha actually contains the secret for what is contained within. The word Ekev literally means heels, like the bottom of a person's feet, the soles of the feet, that part that we call the heel. Now the Zohar and the Arizal explain that the same way that the heels are located at the bottom of a person's body, right? They are the lowest part on the human body. At the same time, and in the same way, this represents the end of any spiritual system in general. Because the human body represents the cosmos, the spiritual order, which we know by the 10 Sefirot. So there are 10 Sefirot, and I have a picture with me today, in case people don't have access to it in their own home or on their laptops or whatever it may be. These are the 10 Sefirot. And if you pay close attention, you'll see that it kind of looks like it's in the shape of a human. Being that the first Sefirah at the top, called Keter, represents the crown that sits on top of a person's head, or the kippah, as Jews wear. Then the Sefirah of Chokhmah and Binah, which are the following two that we see extending from Keter, they represent the right brain and the left brain in a human being. Two parts of the brain. And then we see the following 6 dimensions, 6 Sefirot, which really work together, and they're referred to as Zeir Anpin, or in English that means the miniature face, the miniature, manifestation of the divine. And Zeir Anpin contains these 6 energies, which represents the 6 limbs in your body, being your right arm, your left arm, your torso, your right leg, your left leg, and your groin area, where the reproductive organs really are. So those 6 central locations within the human body make up these following 6 dimensions. And finally, we have Malchut, which is at the bottom, the 10th Sefirah, representing where the person is standing. Represents the place that the person is standing. So when we're talking about the heels of a person's body, that's actually located at the bottom, not just of the body, but also conceptually located at the bottom of the tree of life. Because that's down at the feet where the person is standing, and that represents the Sefirah of Malchut. So now we have some sort of a Kabbalistic, framework to be able to interpret these words, that these are the heels of not just the human body, of course, but these are the heels of the creation. We are right now approaching the heels of Moshiach. The heels of Moshiach. In Hebrew, we refer to this as Ikvota de Meshiche. The heels of the Messiah. What does that mean exactly? Why does Kabbalah say, and Torah explain, that in this generation that we are living today, we are positioned at the heels of the Messiah? This is a very important teaching. And it is specifically because we are in the lowest generation. Spiritually, the people of the world are holding on a very low spiritual level. When I talk about spiritual level, I don't just mean spiritual. I mean holiness. really spiritual is not the right word, because spiritual could be good, but there's also spiritual on the side of evil and the side of darkness. So the word spiritual doesn't inherently mean good. It doesn't inherently mean holy or godly. So we're holding in the lowest generation in terms of purity levels, holiness levels. And in that sense, we're located at the heels of the Messiah, being that that's the final stage before we reach completion and earn the redemption. In other words, that throughout the course of time, the sages and the earlier generations like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and, Moses and Aaron and Joseph and King David, all of these great big giants of Torah and Judaism, they were correcting the other parts, the higher elements of the Sephirotic structure, the tree of life, those that are above Malchut. All of the 9 dimensions that are located above Malchut were actually fixed or rectified. In Hebrew, we call it tikkun. They've been repaired by the earlier generations. But there's a little bit of work that's left to be done, and that little bit of work is located at the bottom, by the heels. And that's the generation we live in, meaning that we are the most material generation, yet at the same time, we are the cause of the redemption. We become the cause of the revelation of Mashiach. It is because of this generation that will uprise in the direction of Torah and mitzvot, in the direction of kindness and compassion, in the area of lending your hand to a fellow and having love for your neighbor, etc. It is this generation that has the opportunity that the generations before us never even had. And that is the opportunity to finish the job once and for all, as we are literally in the end of days. And that's why it's located at the bottom of the where the heels are, because that's the end of the days of this creation. That's the end of the cosmos in a certain sense. Now, a lot of people may be listening to this and still don't understand why I'm saying we're living in the lowest generation. What does that exactly mean? Why are we living in the lowest generation? Okay, we have a lot of problems today, but I think that we've had these problems from all time, haven't we? War, difficulties, financial struggles, people can't seem to get married, etc. Whatever, there has been times in history that have gone through these experiences. So what's unique about this time that makes it the lowest generation versus previous eras where they've experienced similar struggles? And the answer is that every day that passes, ever since the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, some 3,300 years ago in the desert, gets darker and darker and darker the further we come away from the revelation of the Torah. So every single day that passes is a little bit dimmer than the previous day. Why? Because we're getting a little bit further from the revelation of the Torah on Mount Sinai. Now, although that may be true, that does not diminish the fact that our desire and our hunger to know the truth increases day after day. That is also simultaneously true. So although we are going away from the revelation of the Torah, we are also coming closer to building our own vessel, which will then be capable of revealing the Torah within themselves. But that's only true if you are serving God throughout your times. Because a person can exert their energy and their efforts in the wrong direction for their entire life. It's possible that a person should come into this world and use all of his energies and all of his efforts in vain. How? Because he doesn't recognize the centrality of their spiritual existence apart from their material existence. So they spent all of their time chasing after material pleasures and short-lived satisfactions that may be in the benefit of that individual in the short term, but does not take into account the eternity of that soul, which is forever. Therefore, after they pass away and they leave their body behind, they have nowhere to go. They do not have an olam haba, a future in the world to come. So what becomes of that soul? What becomes of the souls that don't use their time in this life wisely? And you don't need me to tell you that the punishment that comes for such a person is not a punishment in the sense that God hates you. The punishment is that you have opted out of a relationship with the Creator. You have opted out. So in this final generation, yes, it's true, we may be the furthest away from the revelation of the Torah, and it is a dark, dark generation, and especially with the advancement of AI, that is now magnifying man's ability to commit evil. But at the same time, man's ability to commit goodness and engage in good things is also being magnified as well. It all comes down to free will. So although on the surface it seems like the world is getting darker, and it is, but on a deeper level, which does not meet the surface of the eye, there's actually another phenomenal event happening at the same time, which is that the righteous are becoming even more righteous. The wicked are becoming more wicked. And that can seem very scary, and that is the source of a lot of the darkness, most of the darkness that we see, because of human selfishness, which is increasing as time passes, as we are in the heels of Mashiach. But at the same time, those that have their head on straight, that feel the urgency of the times, and they direct their efforts and they direct their energies in the path of truth, which means in the path of Torah. It is those people that are becoming more righteous as the days pass. So yes, it's true, we're getting further on the revelation, but we're getting closer to the redemption. And those two aspects are what we're bobbing back and forth between, having one foot in the exile and one foot in the redemption. That's this generation. That's the world we're living in today. That's what makes it unique. That it's not just a theory that the redemption is happening, but rather that it is unfolding before our very eyes. And therefore we are leaving the generation of the exile, and we are about to enter the land of Israel, just as the Israelites stood before the Jordan River in this week's Parashat Ekev, when Moses is giving a speech. And in his speech, Moses reminds the people that it is in fact true that the redemption is taking place. However, just understand that there is a reward and punishment system. God has created this world with reward and punishment. And Moses is giving a speech to the Israelites and letting them know that what goes around most certainly will come around. And the reason for this is the principle in Judaism called midah keneged midah. That whenever a person performs a certain act, or a certain speech, or a certain thought, that act and that choice that the person made has ripple effects. And those ripple effects eventually make their way around town and back to you. So therefore, if you think something positive about another person, they will feel that, and they will be affected by that. Whether it's conscious or subconscious, that positive thought that you had about that individual is making ripple effects. And therefore, that energy goes around and comes around. Same thing happens whenever a person speaks. If I say a prayer with sincerity and with heartfelt compassion and really a sincere desire to connect to Hashem and improve my ways and change my wicked ways, etc., then those speech go up in heaven and create various spiritual worlds, levels of Shemaim and levels of Haaretz that have never existed before. You are adding to the creation by every word that you say. Words have power. It's not just the saying, it's Zohar. We're talking here about the wisdom of Kabbalah. Speech has the power to influence reality. And finally, when you do something that is positive, like a good deed or an act of charity, you don't even need me to explain to you in what way that act has a ripple effect. people will look at you and be inspired to pass the goodness forward. They will be encouraged to stand up for those that are oppressed or downtrodden. They will be empowered to be kind, because this individual that performed this act is literally causing a ripple effect in his surrounding area. So that's why we know, and that's how we know, that what goes around comes around. However, the same thing applies with regards to negative thoughts and negative speech and negative actions. So Olam Haba exists. The eternal world where eternal life and there is no death, that world exists. That is the future. That's the afterlife. But that afterlife takes place whenever the spiritual and the physical worlds merge, which is what's happening now as Mashiach is approaching. That's why we're in the heels of Mashiach. We're not in the head of Mashiach. We're not at the arms. Those aspects of the messianic consciousness have already been corrected. We are now at the final stage, at the bottom of the body of Mashiach. And it's for this reason that we should have simcha, because we were chosen. We were chosen to be here at this time in the history of humanity. God could have placed us at any era. He could have placed us in an earlier generation. For God, there is no time. He could have placed us in a past generation. Why is it that He chose to place us here today? Because each one of us has something to contribute to make the day a little bit brighter. As simple as that. How? By going down into the heels of Mashiach in order to go up even higher. The lower a person falls, the higher they will climb. The reason being that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So therefore, if the hardships of this generation are getting harsher and getting stronger, but not enough to kill you, you just have to stay strong and hold firm in the wisdom of the Torah. Have roots and foundations in the Torah. That way, even though you will get hit and you may get hurt, you will not die. And therefore, if you stay holding, then the storm that's coming will not kill you, and therefore that will make you stronger. That's the result that comes from such a person that sticks their feet into the ground so strongly that when the storm comes, being the storm of the Gog and Magog, which we can see is approaching, you will be able to hold firm and your family will be secure, and those that you have touched and influenced will also be secure because you have done your portion. You have fulfilled your tikkun. You have accomplished what you were here to accomplish. And that's why we were brought into this generation, to make the day just a little bit brighter. When we bring the Mashiach for ourselves, we're able to then help others acknowledge the Mashiach within them. Now, how do we bring the Mashiach for ourselves? We're at the heels of Mashiach. You've got to go down. Confront those hardships that are at the heels, those that are at the bottom of the pit. The monsters and the demons that exist within the bottom of your pit, the pits of your stomach, those evil inclinations that each person holds. Go to war with that aspect of yourself, not out of hatred, not out of a desire to conquer and oppress, but out of a desire to educate, to uplift, and transform that aspect of yourself into what will eventually become the very light of the Messiah. The darkest places hold the potential for the brightest lights, and that's why it's always darkest before the dawn. So I appreciate everybody coming here to learn this week's Parsha. We talked a little bit about the portion itself, but a little bit more about the actual name of the Parsha, which I truly believe is in many ways more important than understanding the details within, and perhaps not even possible to understand the details before understanding this overarching theme of what the Parsha is really about. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next class.